I'm your guest host for the next 2 weeks, Mason, and I'm joined by Silver Pro and member of Team Lingering Souls himself, Michael Hinderocker.
Oh
Michael, thank
boy.
you for coming.
Yeah, I mean, otherwise it would be sort of a weird show. Like,
Just me?
that we'd have to change the name, like,
Mm-hmm.
you'd have to get yourself a new graphic, you'd have to build new video layouts, like, it would really just be inconvenient, so...
Yep. We know what's not inconvenient, Michael, is how quickly Oasis Games gets the cards to you. You can go to our sponsor, Oasis Games. Yep, I'm always ready for that one, Michael, just like they are for your orders.
Oh, man. Oh, man.
You really
So
do have a quick
good.
turnaround time, you know? It's very fast. But no, you can go there and you can use the code CCMTG for a discount on your checkout. And then after a little while, apparently, like Crystal Commerce says you can't use it too much, but at that point you're getting 4% back, so you make more money. It's crazy. I don't know how it works. That's just math in the sky. But you can also visit our other...
So the actual thing is,
Yeah,
if you use the code CCMTG, that's just the letters CCMTG spelled out. You get 15% off your first order from Oasis Games, and then Would That Be Good will get you 4% off every order.
That's so powerful. But if you want to get some sealed product and check out our other sponsor, Fusion Gaming, you can go over to fusiongaming.com. They have sealed product along with other singles as well. Maybe you can't find a weird card Oasis, you can go there and you can check out other content creators that they sponsor, like Nikachu. Michael?
Yeah, that's true.
Now, I'm sorry. I just inflected. I was like, man, Michael normally daggers me here. And he didn't do anything. And
No.
made me come out for it. And I was just like, that's so weird.
No, I'm not usually the one sending the daggers. That's a Spencer special.
Michael, you dagger me too all the time. I'm here every episode. It's not like I can miss an episode. I hear everyone.
I mean, okay, maybe a little bit, but
All right.
like not too much, right?
Yeah,
You know,
that's true.
just enough.
Yeah. Spencer really likes to twist the daggers. If you're wondering where is Spencer instead of my sultry voice, Spencer is moving for the next 2 weeks. For the next 2 weeks, if you're listening to a constructive criticism show and Spencer would be there, I'm there instead. So get excited and get hyped. Before we move on to the rest of the show, though, we do want to give a shout out to a old sister podcast and podcast that I still help with, Proven Combatants. They're currently raising money, Michael, to get Autumn to GP Vegas. So she has the Pro Tour, which she qualified by winning the Mox. The Mox qualifier, I think it still technically was 2 weeks ago. And so she'll be there for the Pro Tour. And then she's going to come to Vegas. So they're currently raising money. And we here at CC are going to match $100 raised for her to come. So if you like Proven Combatants and you hadn't heard about that, Spencer just wanted to make sure that everyone knew we're doing that as a Go Autumn. It's the Go Autumn
Very
fund.
cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
It may be spring, but we're going to help Autumn out.
But don't. Okay, yeah. All right. Okay, we're over it.
Yeah, awesome. Well, normally this would be the part where we do a Patreon question, but we didn't have a Patreon question this week. If you'd like to support us, you can go to patreon.com/ccmtg, and feel free to give back to the show. The show will always be free, but some of the perks you get are a Patreon question and a Patreon deck of the week. A deck doctor, sorry. I always call it deck of the week. I don't know why. That's on me. But this week, we didn't actually have a deck to go over, so we're going to be doing, I think, a lot of new decks next week, Michael. We're going to have a bunch of 5.0s, the SCG, even though they're going to have the classic and stuff to look at, so I'm excited. I don't know about you.
Yeah, we should have more information about what this format is actually looking like at that point. Right now, we're still a little bit all over the place.
But the other perk you get for being a patron of $3 or more is you get entered in Card of the Week. And this week's Card of the Week is, I hope I say this right, Michael, correct me if I'm wrong, Teshar? Is that right? The Ancestral Apostle. It is the 4-mana 2/2 when you play a historic spell, get a creature of converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield.
Yes, that does look like
The
Teshar Ancestor's Apostle.
Oh. Not going to lie.
Close
I didn't know
enough.
the card from name I put in the show notes, so that's on me. It's on me. Yep.
All right, Mason, and what excites you about this card?
So this is a card that, when I first read it, I wasn't very excited. And then I started thinking, like, well, maybe this will see play like in the 4-color Modern Saheeli Cat deck because they play like a decent amount of legendaries and they want to get their creatures back. But then I was listening to another podcast called The Game Podcast, which I'm sure a lot of our listeners listen to. And they seemed really excited about the card. And then I got thinking about the Monument deck with this card. and how it might be the only deck that can really use the Mox to the fullest. And that got me kind of excited about the card, so we thought we'll give away this one since it's new to the week, a new card that not a whole lot of people are talking about.
Yeah, this is kind of a weird one, but potentially a powerful one, and it's a little bit hard to know what is going to be good, but I think this is one that certainly has a little bit of potential.
Yep, and hey, we get it on the ground floor, and if it pays off, you all get rewarded. So we're going to send those out with the other card of the weeks at the end of the month, which I guess will be next week's episode. Oh, actually, no, it'll be the week after.
It'll probably be, probably the week after that.
Yep, because today's the 23rd. So, there you go.
Yes.
Boom. So, we're going to move on to our power rankings this week. So, there weren't any big tournaments because of the pre-release and like that, and there's not a whole lot we can really talk about with Standard. The 5.0 deck list came out today, but they're missing cards that are from the new set. So, you can
it's kind of awkward.
Yeah. There's like a mono red deck, and it's like 56 cards, and it's like, alright, I think that's Goblin Chain Wielder. Not 100% sure, so we're going to do Modern instead. So let's move on to our power rankings here, Michael. And our 5th place deck coming in is Storm. Mike, what do you think about Storm Modern right now?
Well, Storm is good against Hollow One, it's pretty good against Affinity, and it's good against Tron.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's in an okay spot. Humans is not a great matchup, but I also don't think it's as bad as people think it is.
Do you feel like Storm has adapted? Because I know originally it was, but I mean, obviously Storm players...
Yeah, Storm is just, like, built differently these days. Like, if I look at the... Let's see. Like, the 6-1 list has a main deck Repeal and the main deck Unsubstantiate. And then in the sideboard gets Engineered Explosives, Lightning Bolt, Abrade, and Wipe Away.
Mm-hmm.
So...
They're ready.
I think, yeah, like, you're not going to just, like, this isn't like before where you could just lock them out with, like, a Meddling Mage or two.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're really going to have to slog through a bunch of removal in the boarded games, plus just fast goblins. Yeah. I mean, I still think Humans is favored, but it's not, it's nowhere near as lopsided as it felt maybe early in that matchup.
Yeah, it felt like when the matchup first came out, it was super favored, but now it does seem like they've evened it out. I'm curious to know what you think about the card Engineered Explosives. I think it's been getting a real tick up these last 6 or 7 months in Modern, and I think it's in almost all the sideboards we talk about tonight. So, what do you think of this card? Do you think it is like a card people should be picking up if they're playing decks that are 3 colors and stuff like that? What do you think? Because it feels like to me, Humans has really made it prominent.
Yeah, it's a little bit slow, but one of the sweet things about this card is that it's unaffected by Thalia unless you wanted to play it on 0, which you probably wouldn't against a deck playing Thalia. So it isn't made more glacial by that, and I think one of the things with all these, there's a lot of value in having a diversity of removal.
Mm-hmm.
And Engineered Explosives is a sweeper that basically any deck can play that's good against, like, Affinity, Lantern, Humans, Boggles. Like, it's pretty flexible.
Okay, yeah, I like that. It is really good against all those decks. We're not going to talk about it on the power rankings. I am curious to know what you think about Boggles, though, before we go on. Spoilers, it's not one of the decks we're going to talk about.
I mean, I really like Boggles. Like, it's just kind of amusing, and I think it's kind of a good time. Okay. But I am certainly not a Boggles master.
You're not a Bogler?
I mean, I play it sometimes, but, you know, mostly just when I'm trying to relax. Like, it's kind of fun, right?
Yeah. Get a little Bogle, slip them up, boom, get in there. Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to say about Storm. I personally don't think Storm is where I would want to be at all in Modern. Especially with Damping Sphere, I believe is how you actually say it, coming out in the next set. Have you looked at that card at all, Michael, for Modern?
Yeah, I've seen it a little bit, and I mean, I guess it means... I think the secret is that it's... Number one, it's an artifact, so in some decks, it's going to continue... Like, you're already going to have ways to handle artifacts in, but my impression is the more that Storm has evolved, the less linear it is after sideboarding. Like, you pretty much always have a bunch of answers in your deck to all kinds of different permanents in boarded games, and I'm just not really convinced that, like, one more permanent this is going to be the one, right? Like, if I have to have all these bounce spells in my deck anyways, and engineered explosives and whatever, maybe it changes the composition and makes me move away from lightning bolt a little bit, or something like that. But I really don't think that unless this card is, even if this card is massively popular, I just don't think it matters very much.
So you're thinking, even if you were like a Storm pilot and you love Storm, week 1 of Dominaria Modern, you'd be like, well, I'm just gonna jam into it, even though a lot of people, like, I think, so at first I thought the card was like crazy good, and then I realized you have to have a clock to make it actually good. That's like the secret, right? It's like
that's just true of every card. It's not a creature, so I mean, my thought is mostly just that, like, it makes your rituals not work, but it doesn't make your filtering really any worse. So, maybe you end up playing more repeals or something like that, but I feel like, for the most part, it's just not. I would be really surprised if this was especially good in general.
Okay. Gotcha. Alright, well, I'm curious to come back to this in a little bit when we talk about another deck on the list, but I agree.
Yeah,
I think if you're going to play Storm, you need to be cognitive that. You need to be aware of this card. I haven't eaten. I'm so tired. Alright. Let's move on to the next deck on our list, and that is Affinity. Michael, this deck just never seems to go away. What do you think about Affinity right now?
Yeah, this is actually my favorite deck in Modern.
Ooh.
By a lot. Like, this is what I've been playing the last couple of weeks to some pretty decent results online. It's just explosive. I like your humans matchup pretty well. I like the Tron matchup now that they're all mono green. I don't think you're unfavored. I think you're pretty heavily favored versus humans, Hollow One, and Tron, and your Storm matchup is pretty bad, and your Stony Silence matchup is pretty bad.
Yeah, I agree. Your Stony Silence matchup is not where you want to be.
But the flip side is that, like, your best draws are just so much better than everyone else's that it kind of doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Right? Like, when you actually, like, I played, I think, 3 or 4 leagues with Affinity yesterday, and I think I went 4-1 in all of them. And so many times, like, my opponents would have pretty good hands. Like, I had an opponent, playing some control deck, keep a hand with, like, Spell Snare on the draw, and I went, like, turn 1, Memnite, Ornithopter, Inkmoth Nexus, Steel Overseer. He has a Spell Snare or whatever, and just like, well, unfortunately I won the die roll, so you're probably losing this one.
Yeah, that's very true.
It's just really powerful. I think it rewards good play, and I really like sequencing decks, so Affinity really ticks a lot of boxes for me.
Okay, so I have a question for you. Is it the kind of deck that you would play at a GP? Like, if you had, do you know what I mean?
Yeah. It's frustrating to be weak to cards, because I think one of the worst things about having a deck that's weak to cards, not to decks, is that you actually are worse against the worst players than you are against the better players.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Right? Owen is never going to play 3 or 4 Stony Silences in his sideboard. But you can easily in round 3, 1, 2, or 3 play against someone who just, like, their goal was not to lose to Affinity this weekend, and so they're not going to do it. And I think that's just something you have to accept with Affinity. I don't know that it's, like, necessarily a huge reason not to play it, but I think that it's definitely something to be cognizant of, and something that can be frustrating.
Yeah, I definitely don't think it's a reason not to play it. I meant more just, like, talking to you and asking you, because that would be one of the bigger fears I have of playing it. Same thing with KCI. Where KCI can actually beat Stony Silence. Not that Affinity can't. It obviously can, because KCI has Nature's Claim and whatnot in the sideboard.
Sure.
Yeah, Affinity is more all in on the Aether Grid and attack with my 1/1s plan, which sometimes works because people just keep Stony hands, but a lot of the times doesn't. So I was just wondering where you fell on that, because Owen, I don't know if you read his SCG article. He talked about all right, so Owen wrote an article on Hollow One, and he basically said that maybe Humans is slightly better than Hollow One in Modern right now, but he believes they're the 2 best decks, and that someone of his caliber shouldn't play a deck like Humans, because it just loses to too many things. Like, you're just bad against EE, you're just bad against Wrath, and stuff like that. and that Hollow One doesn't allow for that. So I was curious what your thoughts about that were in the context of Affinity and Stony Silence.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just like people who don't like modern, and I kind of count myself in that category. I think struggle with that a lot in general. Like, you play a lot of games that are decided by single cards, and so in a lot of formats you have cards that sort of serve as like. You have, say Stony Silence is like your hard stop, Affinity is too good, push the metagame back in the other direction. Mm-hmm. But in a lot of formats with less powerful linear decks, you just have sort of metagame shifts that keep things under control a little bit. The problem is that some of these decks just act like if you didn't have to play against hate cards as Affinity, I'm not really convinced you have any bad matchups.
Okay.
So a lot of playing a deck like this is being okay with playing against hate cards. And when you're playing something like Hollow One, you're playing something kind of halfway in between, right? It's not as linear or powerful as Affinity, mm-hmm. but there aren't any cards that are just lights out, I'm never beating this.
Yeah, that's very true.
So I think that like straddling the line a little bit can be a powerful thing, and it comes down to what you're comfortable with and just what you enjoy.
Okay, I can get behind that. I was just curious on your thoughts about that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's hard to say. It's hard to say much beyond that. Like, if you, so to me, when I hear Owen's statement, what I'm really hearing is it's not just someone of his caliber, but he personally has a problem with losing to cards, not archetypes.
Yes.
And he would rather have matchups that are bad archetypically than matchups where his opponent slams a card and it's very hard to beat. And I think that's a valid approach. But
he mentions Mono Green Tron as well as another deck he would play.
Right, because there just aren't single cards that destroy Tron.
Yeah. They can be hard to beat, but they can all be beaten, so...
Yeah, I mean, I think the caliber of hate cards against these decks is just a lot weaker. So I can see where he's coming from, and I think it's an interesting take. I'm not necessarily sure. There are a lot of people who play the same deck for long periods of time in Modern. There are a lot of people who've had a lot of consistent success with Affinity, and decks that fall more along those lines. So I don't know that necessarily one is like the more correct viewpoint than the other, but I think it's interesting to sort of split those out as two approaches to a format.
Yeah, I like that. So the synopsis of that, or the summary, I should say. All right, let's move on to the next deck on our list. We have Mono Green Tron. Now it's interesting because they listed as Red Green Tron online. I'm like, oh, awesome! They've adapted Pyroclasm to beat like Affinity and Humans and stuff like that. And I couldn't actually find any Red Green lists in like the first 5 or 6 of them. So
yeah,
it seems just to be Mono Green and mislabeled, but. Yeah, this is a deck that is really consistent at doing its thing and is really good. Now, you used to play a lot of Tron like a year ago. I remember you played a couple events with it. What has pushed you away from this deck? Because you talked about how Affinity is more your deck of choice these days.
I've played some Tron. I guess ultimately my biggest issue with Tron is just that it doesn't hold my interest very well. Mm-hmm. I don't necessarily think it's a poor deck. I think it's just a deck that isn't really quite my speed, all things being equal. I also think that the metagame has shifted pretty far away from metagames where Tron has a lot of easy matchups. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think Humans is a fairly good matchup, but like Affinity is kind of sketchy, Hollow One is kind of sketchy, Storm is pretty awful. Tron is very good against the kind of other random nonsense. Like, and it's just sort of the most, in a way it's kind of, it can both feel like the most linear deck and relatively adaptable. You win a fair amount of games against, like, if neither of your decks really function very well, Tron will win a lot of games that look like that, just because, like, eventually you're going to play, like, Karn into Ulamog, and even if it's kind of slow and not all coming together correctly, like, Bowstone, Karn, Ugin, Ulamog, or whatever is, like, it's going to win the game if you ever cast them.
Okay.
And then it's also like it can be almost kind of like a turn 3 deck.
Yeah, definitely.
At times, right? So I think you get kind of the best of both worlds with Tron a little bit, in that it can be like, it can be sort of a strange fair deck when your opponent is more focused on disrupting you than actually killing you, but you can still win some of the matchups where they're really focused on just killing you quickly with, quick Karn or Wormcoil Engines or whatever. So I think it's a powerful deck, but it's not my favorite. What are your feelings on Tron these days?
So I've been playing a lot of Hollow One recently, so I've been really happy to run into Tron. I agree with you that I think the format's a little hostile to it right now. I think the decks that are performing really well, like Humans, Hollow One, Affinity, and stuff like that, do really well against Tron, and it's hard for them to curve out perfectly and beat you because the other decks are either so fast or have disruptive elements that they can't really get there. I also think that people just hate Tron, and I don't know, I always feel like people have so much hate for Tron when they have no hate, and I don't know if I like being on a deck like that personally. Same thing with Affinity, where it's like I feel like I'm going to run to the guy with 3 Stonies, or I'm going to run to someone that has nothing.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think that the hate cards against Tron are particularly good.
Yeah, I know,
I mean, they mostly I just don't really think do anything.
I feel like Brian Gottlieb of the Game Podcast and First Strike says that Blood Moon just doesn't beat Tron. And while I agree that Blood Moon doesn't beat Tron, right, because it doesn't actually do anything, it just turns their lands off and makes them draw the Nature's Claims.
Yeah, I don't think these iterations of Tron just don't care about Blood Moon.
Okay, I haven't played the mono green ones. I'd only ever played green red and the blue one.
Yeah, I mean these decks are playing. So realistically, this deck is playing at least 13 green sources. When you count the star and the sphere, right? Yeah. And they're playing O-Stone, which pops at 5, and they're playing a bunch of Wormcoil Engines. I just don't think this deck really cares that much. None of the decks that play Blood Moon clock you fast enough for it to matter.
Okay, but do you think they disrupt you enough, like the Blue Moon decks that have been fairly popular?
I don't know what I'm supposed to be. I just don't think Blood Moon is good.
Okay. Yeah, I don't like the Blue Moon.
Where are you excited about casting a Blood Moon these days?
I mean, Tron is the one. That'd be the only one I'd be happy with.
So,
green mana bases, but yeah.
Okay, but it's not good against Burn. It's not good against. So I mean, right? I'm looking at the top 8 decks.
Okay. Well, it's not. I guess.
Okay. So not good against Hollow One. Not good against Humans. Not good against Affinity. Not good against Tron. Really. It doesn't do anything against Storm. It can be good against Jund.
Can it be good?
But I don't know that.
If you're a disruptive deck, can you keep them off stuff enough and then lock them in mana?
I think that matchup is good, but I don't think really Blood Moon is good.
Okay.
I think Lightning Bolt Snapcaster Mage is very good against Humans.
Yeah, I agree.
But I don't really think that Blood Moon is this it's kind of overkill. I think mostly if you have Lightning Bolts and Anger of the Gods and Snapcaster Mages, you're going to be hard pressed to lose that matchup very often.
That's fair.
But drawing Blood Moons is probably one of the ways you can actually lose that matchup.
Yeah, so you just don't have any interactivity, and you're just hope they don't have any Aether Vow when you play the Blood Moon, or hope they have
I'm just not sure where I'm excited about playing Blood Moon these days.
That's very true.
Especially because with so few decks playing it, it tends to be pretty obvious when your opponent is, and especially out of these blue-red shells where they're trying to cast Cryptic Command as well. So anytime you see someone fetch the second basic island, you know.
Yeah, alarms go
off. When their lands are Island, Sulphur Falls, right? You know anytime your opponent plays 2 basic islands, you basically know what the deal is. So I don't know. I just have not been that impressed by Blood Moon lately.
That's fair. Maybe I just am having past biases cloud my thoughts on Tron. Because I do think Tron is a deck that's you can play at any event and do well. But I just don't think now is the right time to be playing it.
It's not my favorite, but I certainly I wouldn't fault you for playing it if it's something that you like and something you think you play well and understand the sideboard. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's true.
There's a lot to be said for just playing what you're good at and playing what you're comfortable with. And I think that Tron is certainly a deck that if you like, it's a totally reasonable choice. I also don't think Damping Sphere is going to matter at all to Tron.
Yeah. Okay. So that was the thing I was about to bring up. So you even though it just disrupts them, do you Here's my
maybe a little more than like Blood Moon, just because I think you could like play it in Affinity, or you could play it out of anything hypothetically. The flip side is that like you're already trying to Oblivion Stone every aggressive deck anyways.
Mm-hmm. So it just gets caught up in it. It's just not a 2-drop that's attacking you.
It's kind of 6s, right? Like it's about the same as playing like something that's attacking you. Most of the time.
So what I'm hearing from you is first 2 weeks of Dominaria, everyone's jamming their spheres in their sideboard. Then after that, we'll see it out of like Lantern and every now and again. Is that what
I mean, I don't think it's like it's not terrible. It's just I'm not so excited about this card that I think we need to abandon decks that have been great for months.
Okay. Yeah. That's the weird thing too is like Tron is in this weird spot where like we always say like, oh, it's not super great right now, but it's always like 3 or 4 every time we do a power rankings, and it's always like losing to the top decks because it always beats the decks that beat those decks. It's always
Tron is sort of the metagame call smasher, right? Anytime you're like trying to do cute, I mean, I think it is good against humans for what it's worth.
Okay.
I think just all the sweepers are really tough. But anytime you're trying to do something kind of cute, Tron just like it beats you when you disrupt it but don't kill it quickly, and it beats you when you don't disrupt it.
That's true.
That's just a really tough
big ass
series to you're just really asking a lot of your deck at that point.
Okay. Alright, well let's move on to the best deck in Modern and also our deck of the week. So we're gonna just touch on a little bit here and then come back and talk about Orat's list. And we have Hollow One. Michael, I got your hot take 2 weeks ago on Hollow One. I got Spencer's 3 weeks ago when I was on.
I don't even remember what I said.
I said yes or no, you like Hollow One, and you said yeah, I like it. So there you go.
Okay, well that's kind of like a lukewarm take, but Hollow One is really good. One of the things that I actually think is kind of fun about this deck, like I think people think of it as kind of like a idiotic deck because a lot of your best draws are like very stupid.
Yeah.
But I think to actually play Hollow One perfectly is incredibly difficult, and I felt really validated. I read a Mike Sigris tweet that after this Grand Prix where he and Owen played the same list, he was like, Hollow One is actually by far the hardest deck I've ever played to play perfectly.
Yeah.
I felt so validated because so much of the time when you're like, okay, what are my outs? You know, you're like thinking of 1 turn or 2 turns ahead. With this deck, you're like, okay, so if I draw Street Wraith into Burning Inquiry, and then I Burning Inquiry, would I have rather played the land or held the land? Should I play a fetch land and crack it so that I don't draw a land? Should I play a fetch land and not crack it so if I draw and discard Bloodghast? Mm-hmm. And, you know, you're just actually doing things like that, like half of the turns of every game.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. It's funny because, like, so I saw this deck after the Pro Tour, and I'm like, oh, that's funny, meme, ha ha ha. And then it was kind of like, all right, so you're going to be on team for SCG. I'm like, well, everyone keeps saying this deck is good, let's play it. And I started playing it, I noticed what you said. And then since then, I've got a lot of respect for the deck and been playing the deck a whole lot. And I think it is really hard to play.
It's really funny, right? Because you pick it up because it's like, oh, this deck is such a meme, ha 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 ha. And then you're like, am I stupid, or is this the hardest deck I've ever played by like a substantial margin?
So that's exactly what happened to Teresa from Proven Combatants. Because I was talking to them before the show, and they joked, and she's like, oh, I'll stream tomorrow, play the deck. She played the deck, and after the first round, she goes on stream, she's like, that was so hard. I thought I was just supposed to like throw my hand on the board. And then she talked about how like it was incredibly hard, and I agree, it's crazy. We're gonna come back to this deck more after the next one because it's our deck of the week. But okay. That's your little entree about Hollow One. I'm excited to talk about it with Michael. But let's get on to the deck that some people thought would be a fad and has turned out to be probably the best or second best deck in Modern, 5-color humans. Michael, what do you think of this deck?
Yeah, I mean, it's like obviously very good. It just keeps trucking along. I mean, this is like... This deck, I think, is also surprisingly skill-intensive. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of little timing tricks you can do. There's a lot of like deck list tweaks you can make. Sequencing your lands, sequencing your spells, and like using your Aether Vials correctly and your sideboard slots effectively. It's like it looks like kind of a meme deck too. And then you start playing the games and you're like, okay, am I supposed to vial this in now, or like in their draw step, or how do I want to use my meddling mages? What do my phantasmal images copy? When do I lead on noble hierarch? When do I lead on champion of the parish? Like, maximizing the really small edges is extremely challenging with this deck.
I agree. I think it's weird because it does kind of seem like that deck, but because it has cards like Meddling Mage, people are like, oh, it's like so much harder than like Hollow One. I don't know. That's just something I've noticed. But yeah, I want to talk about the sideboard slots and less about that. So this is one of the decks that has, I think, consistently been a top deck whose sideboards are different every single time I see them. Like,
yeah,
every time they're just way different.
The secret is that the sideboard is like pretty bad.
is that the secret I just don't know for not playing it enough?
Yeah, I mean that's like the biggest problem with the deck by far.
Okay. I mean, you only can use creatures, so it kind of makes sense. So here are some ones I want your takes on. Hostage Taker.
I haven't played with it very much. So this is the awkward thing. You can't play mirror tech creatures out of the sideboard because they're like not that good because your opponent also has 4 phantasmal images.
Okay. Yep. That makes a lot of sense.
So it's a little bit
artifact decks, but yeah.
Right. Yeah, I think it's more for Lantern and Affinity.
Yeah, I think it is for Lantern, to be fair. I think is what Zan said.
Yes. I mean, I'd probably side it in against Affinity too, but
yeah,
Lantern.
Sure.
Lantern specifically. It's cute. You probably can't play more than 2, maybe even just 1, but it's pretty cute. It's like a little bit of a different angle than like a Kataki, right? It's more like kind of a Rex Sage that you could side in even against like Jund if you wanted to.
Yeah. It's funny they have both those cards in their sideboard as well, the list we have on screen.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at that list.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, I'm not just Psychic.
Yo, sometimes I know you like to click through different lists, so I was just like, oh yeah.
I was clicking through a few of them, but yeah.
Yeah, okay. And so, other hot take, what do you think about Auriok Champion?
I played it. It's good against Burn, which is like a pretty close matchup. I
just don't like that.
It's like kind of medium. I was siding in against Hollow One. Thought it was pretty good there.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
I
don't know. Maybe it is just like the sideboard slots aren't like you can't get a lot out of them, and you're like, well, this card does a couple things in a couple matchups.
I mean, like we're all playing a bunch of Staticasters and like Dismembers, and almost everyone's playing like at least one Sin Collector, and some people are playing like Gutshot. I mean, the sideboard for this deck is terrible.
Yeah, I wonder how it's going to evolve. Like, if there's ever going to be like a unified list.
The problem is that like it kind of has to be a human because Cavern of Souls and Unclaimed Territory really wants you to play humans, so you have to be pretty judicious with playing non-humans. Like, you can maybe play some Katakis or Selfless Spirit or like a Gaddock Teague, but you're really, really limited on the number of non-human sideboard slots. And I think that just makes it pretty clear why the sideboard is often so bad. Like, you're also playing Ancient Ziggurat, so you like can't really play spells out of your sideboard. It's super awkward. It's if this deck had an actual functional sideboard, it would be probably the best deck by a lot.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. What do you think, last question here, what do you think about Dark Confidant? So that's a card we've seen, it started off in the board back when Collins won the first Open, when undefeated. Now we're seeing it main deck sometimes. We saw Pat Cox play it. We have Motor name I can't read right now, playing one in the main deck. What do you think about this card in the archetype?
Yeah, a lot of people are playing one.
Yeah.
A lot of people look like they've cut a Thalia for one. I think just trying to not draw double Thalia as often.
That's what Pat Cox said in his interview. He was saying just like, you don't ever really want a second Thalia.
But it's like the 4th Thalia. Yeah, it's surprisingly mediocre in this deck, just because you have a lot of both low impact. Like, you're very much trying to get ahead on board and then sort of out-tempo your opponent. Your cards aren't really individually very powerful, and just getting extra random cards like once doesn't really usually do that much for you.
So why don't they just play another Malcontents? This guy has one in their list.
So sometimes people are playing Malcontents. I mean, The real secret is that about 57 cards in the deck are more or less solved, and those 57 are so sort of thematic that I honestly just don't think it matters what your last 3 cards are.
Okay, I'll buy it.
Right? It's like a Malcontents, Direfleet Daredevil, a random 4-drop that can be like one of 25 different things, and Dark Confidant are the cards that people choose.
Word. I never see Huntmaster. I feel like that'd be one that someone tries. Is Huntmaster not a human?
I have no idea.
I don't either.
I have never seen someone play Huntmaster, but you see like... there's one of these lists with... I've seen lists with Whirler Rogue, with PN Kirin, with a main deck Resto Angel. There's a list with Thalia Heretic Cathar. I've seen people play a one of Thraben Inspector.
By the way.
I've seen Zathrid Necromancer at the Pro Tour. I believe Andrea Mengucci played a Kythian, Hero of Akros. So, choose mostly anything.
Gotcha. Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you for going over that. And sorry for the background noise. I got a little bit of trying to take care of that. All right, well, let's move on to our deck of the week. And the deck we kind of skipped over a little bit in our power rankings. And this is Hollow One. Michael, will you read Orat's deck list for us real quick?
Yeah, so Owen's playing... Instead of reading the entire deck list, I'm just going to talk about his changes. I assume we're all mostly familiar with what Hollow One looks like at this point. Sure. So Owen made the decision to play a single Sacred Foundry and cut the 2 Collective Brutalities plus 1 Delve creature for a...
I thought he called it Netherworld.
Well, they were playing a Call of the Netherworld. Compared to the stock lists, he cut 2 Collective Brutalities and a Delve creature for 3 Lingering Souls.
Okay. So what do you think about this before I hop in with my take?
Okay, so there were a couple of things that surprised me a little bit. I was surprised... I understand why he did this, but I was surprised that he still opted for Ancient Grudge over Stony Silence in the board with that setup.
Okay.
Because it requires you to play an off-color, like a Shock Mountain in your main deck. So you're not playing like... You're pretty much always going to be playing at least 1 Shock Mountain in your main deck.
Yeah, it's just a flex slot.
Like in any configuration, though, you're going to have like pretty much either a dead Stomping Ground or a dead Sacred Foundry.
You mean post board?
Even post board, usually one of them is going to be dead.
You sideboard them out post board. Like if you don't play the Stomping Grounds, you just sideboard it out. That's like
you think so?
No, yeah, I've seen a lot of people do it. Like Nassif does it. I've seen people on the stream do it. Yeah, so normally what you do is if you, and maybe this is wrong, but if you don't play with the Ancient Grudge, you sideboard out the Stomping Ground. Normally because the matchups where you want it, you're bringing the lower mana cards anyways. Yeah,
that's true. My concern with that is just that I don't think this deck mulligans very well, and I don't like cutting mana sources from, an 18 mana source deck.
Okay, that's fair.
That being said, if you're seeing better players doing that, they're probably correct. So I guess his thought is that Lingering Souls will give you more staying power. It'll give you more ability to race. And it's just another card that provides value when you discard it, right?
In his article, he mentions that he believes Lingering Souls is one of the most powerful cards in Modern. So that was part of how he got to this point.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think Scotty suggested this on Twitter like 2 weeks ago.
Oh, okay, sure. Yeah. I agree with all that. It does make your discards better. I mean, basically your Collective Brutalities and your Call to Netherworld or Gurmag Angle or whatever card you were playing in that slot to cut for it, they were just grindy cards, and Lingering Souls does the exact same thing. It grinds better.
Brutality was not especially good in this deck. It was awkward that you could only discard 2, and that it cost 2 mana. So it couldn't really enable free Hollow One turns, even if you ended up with multiple Hollow Ones in your hand. You were always going to have to either pay something or find another way to discard an extra card. I also think that just generally, you have a lot of ability to filter through your deck, and it's pretty easy to find a single Delve creature, but because of the Bloodghasts and Flamewake Phoenixes...
I think we lost Michael here for a second.
cut a delve creature. I don't know if my internet is working, but
yeah, you're back. So if you're listening to the actual
Okay.
podcast, we're using Audacity, so you heard all of that. Can you give me a TLDR real quick on that?
Yeah, basically, I was just saying that like cutting one delve creature, I don't think is a huge loss, and neither of the brutalities. The brutalities are a little awkward because they all let you discard 2.
Yes.
And casting multiple delve creatures with all of your like blood ghasts, you don't really want to delve away faithless lootings a lot of the time if you can avoid it. So trying to cast actually 2 delve creatures in the first 3 or 4 turns of the game is really challenging.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
You can often play 1, but playing 2 or 3 is really, really tough. So I imagine that Lingering Souls like gives you better game against Liliana. Not that Liliana was particularly good against you to begin with, but it's good against just all your grindier matchups.
Yeah, it's good against your grindier matchups, and it does the thing that this deck really excels at, and I figured we talked about when we got to the deck of the week part of the show, where it tries to minimize the variance that some of the cards have in it. So, like, basically everything but Lightning Bolts, you're okay with discarding. Like, that and the Delve creatures are the only ones you really don't want to discard.
Well, and Lightning Bolt is often okay to discard.
Yeah,
I mean, the secret is that a lot of the time you're actually not supposed to cast your Lightning Bolts to increase your chances of holding Hollow Ones, even if Hollow One isn't in your hand yet.
Yeah.
That's where this deck becomes incredibly difficult to play, and why I think it's appealing to players like Owen and Mike Sigrist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
It's a deck where you're very frequently rewarded for making correct marginal decisions and understanding your like greater game plan as opposed to just making the play that feels correct on the surface.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree that Lingering Souls pushes you further in that direction. My only real concern looking at his 75, I wonder about Ancient Grudge versus Stony Silence, but I haven't played Hollow One so extensively that I have like a real opinion on that. Again, I would imagine it largely has to do with Burning Inquiry and Goblin lore, right? You always get something out of...
That's the reason why. Also, I feel like the other matchups where you want it, Lantern is a really hard matchup game 1, and you really want to be able to blow up a bridge in Alpha for 1 turn. And while Stony is pretty good against Lantern, it's not as good as Ancient Grudge is, where Ancient Grudge can get through a bridge.
Well, I think it's a lot better than Ancient Grudge, but you have to actually find it in the early game and not get it inquisitioned, right? Like,
yeah, that's true.
They're different cards.
That's true. I mean,
and I think just the nature of Ancient Grudge, right? Like in a deck that frequently gets deep, where like you'll have a Burning Inquiry or a Faithless Looting, so they can't necessarily control every draw you have.
Yes.
Right. I mean that's where it gets more interesting. So that's interesting. My only real concern is that against decks a little more combo slanted, cutting all the brutalities and then only going down to just 1 Thoughtseize in the board really puts you in a spot where I would imagine your Storm matchup is worse than the more stock lists.
Yes.
And like your ad nauseum matchup, if that's a thing you're concerned about, or
no.
But I mean, like any of that kind of stuff, right? I mean, just like the things that don't really care about creatures get a lot tougher when you play, the 3rd Grim Lavamancer and the 3rd Fatal Push and the 2nd Big Game Hunter over the 2nd Thoughtseize.
Yeah, I feel like not to criticize Orat because he runs these streets, but I feel like Owen has too much little creature hate, personally, from how I've been playing the deck. So, like, the biggest differences of mine is I have, like, 1 less Leyline of the Void, 1 less Grim Lavamancer, 1 less Fatal Push, and instead I have, I have 2 EEs and a Liliana of the Veil, which I'm not super happy with Liliana of the Veil. It's probably going to turn back into the 2nd Thoughtseize, but you have more game against that kind of stuff. And I feel like the little creature decks, you only need a little bit of disruption to stop them, because I feel like the decks that are good against Hollow One, in particular, are decks that get on the ground early and go wide, and so they can chump block you and then alpha strike back, so like elves, humans, stuff like that, and you don't really want too much of this stuff because you still have to develop your game plan, is what I found. So like I need like a Grim Lavamancer or a Fatal Push, but I don't want to be drawing 2 or 3 of them. Yeah,
it's interesting. That being said, I think that Lingering Souls is interesting. It's something a little bit different than what we've seen before, so I'm curious to see if this is more stock going forward or if people go back to what previously were the stock lists.
Yeah, I didn't look too much, but I haven't seen too many 5-0s or results with Lingering Souls in the deck. So it might have just been a fad. I'm currently planning to play Lingering Souls this weekend at the SCG, where I'm playing this deck, so...
Yeah, I played a bit of Hollow 1 Online earlier this week, and I had found the metagame in general was just pretty hostile to it, so...
Yeah.
You know... It's hard to say, like, a lot of it can be a funny deck to play in that it's both very challenging, but I wouldn't say there's more variance than other decks, but I think you maybe feel it more than with some other decks.
That's what yeah.
Like, when you're running cold, it really feels like you could never possibly win.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel that way a lot with the deck. I feel because the cards say random on them, right, and because you do need to be discarding cards for a lot of your cards to do stuff, people get afraid of that, and then they feel like the variance is so much higher, when in reality it's not much higher than other decks, you know?
I mean, I think variance is just a part of Magic, and It's honestly, like, often a good part of Magic. It's just... I think that's one of the things that makes Magic appealing, but it can feel frustrating, and I think that just this deck in particular, when it's going badly for you, it just feels worse sometimes.
Mm. All right, Michael,
So.
You have to choose. You have to play Humans or Hollow 1 at the next GP. What do you choose?
I would probably play a slight lean Hollow 1.
That's all I need to hear. I just wanted to know, because we had talked about it, like, you know, Orat's opinion of stuff and everything we've gone over tonight. We don't need to repeat ourselves, but yeah, it's a deck that I think is good, and I wish more people.
But that being said, Human's very good too.
There's no wrong answer there. I gave you like the 2 best decks in Modern, so.
Sure. Yeah. No. It's definitely not the worst choice to have to make.
Yep, I agree 100%. All right, well, that's going to do it for our power rankings this week. Thank you, Michael, for talking about the Modern metagame with this. I had a lot of fun. A lot of fun talking about Hollow 1, too. It's nice to have someone who isn't hating on it on the podcast. Not just a lone stallion defending the Hollow 1 like normal. All right, let's move on to our training grounds. We're sorry this episode's a little bit shorter than normal. We had to do it a little bit earlier and get it done a little bit earlier for Michael here. You know, Michael's a big timer. He's got a lot of Platinum Pro friends on Facebook, so you know, it's really nice that he makes time for us. So let's move right into our training grounds.
Oh, that's the greatest insult I've ever heard. You know me, I have better things to do, like not much.
Yeah, you could grind Moto Leagues. You could.
Yeah, exactly. I could play Sealed on Magic Online. That's what I have to do.
Yeah, you get to play. You get to go play the GP, Michael.
It's true. I mean, I'm excited to play the Grand Prix, but I'm not like super excited to play a bunch of Sealed Leagues on Magic Online.
Is it team limited for the Grand Prix, by the way?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
That's what I thought. I wasn't sure. Okay, that's either here or there. Let's move on to our training grounds, Michael, and that's overcoming a defeatist attitude. So, Michael, what do we mean by defeatist attitude?
So, I think that having a defeatist attitude, it's like almost what I find is what having a defeatist attitude is sort of believing you're going to lose before you've really played, just on the most simple level.
Yes, I believe that is a good like baseline Magic definition for defeatist attitude. So or expecting to run cold, right? That kind of thing. Yeah, mentally resigning before the results have actually happened is kind of what I had in mind when I was thinking about this training grounds. Yeah, so I feel like this happens a lot when people are just starting to first play Magic competitively. Like they get a round 11 feature match against Jerry Thompson, and they're like, I could never beat Jerry Thompson. And then they go on and they play the match, and maybe they do lose. It happens. But they gave up before it even happened, and it decreased. Michael, I don't see why you're laughing.
Oh, the daggers are so real.
But yeah, no, but you know what I mean? Like, they gave up before it even started, and then they lost percentage points. And because they had already given up, they didn't be like, well, maybe I can pop this Bomat Courier here and draw, you know, Lightning Strike him. Or
my biggest thing with thinking like this is that I think it leads to you taking the focus away from making the best plays you can make. Mm-hmm. And I think that in general, like, having big focus on variance kind of does this too, and it's the biggest reason that that's so bad for your game. And I think this kind of falls into some of the same category, right? You're just like focusing on how you're going to get unlucky, or focusing on how good your opponent is, and like ultimately, if you play perfectly, there's no way you're going to win like less than 50% of your matches, right?
Yeah,
if you play perfect, well, but if you actually succeed at playing perfectly, which over the course of like a single game is maybe actually possible, you pretty much can't be worse than 50-50, barring the matchup just being bad. And even if the matchup is bad, like there's a lot of value in playing to your outs and giving yourself the best chance possible.
All right. I feel
right. I mean, because that's all Magic ever comes down to, right? You don't you really never have control. Your opponent might play really well, even if you don't know who they are. They could play perfectly or near perfectly through a game, and like.
I'm gonna pause you real quick. I'm gonna take care of something in real life real quick. You keep talking. I'll be right back.
And I can't help but feel like when you are so focused on kind of negativity, it's very difficult for you to just make the correct plays. And when you're actually in the middle of a match, I think focusing on just what's in front of you rather than the implications of the game, the what winning versus losing does for you, how you feel about winning versus losing, and instead taking each game as sort of a learning opportunity and just trying to play your best regardless of outcome. Okay. I think it's just putting emphasis, in the same way that I would say it's unhealthy to write off matches against bad players and not try. I would say it's unhealthy. You know what I mean? Right, but it's kind of for the same reason, right? The emphasis should be on your play and your ability to
learn
to play tightly and learn from situations. And especially when you're playing against someone better than you, those are often the best opportunities for you to learn.
Yeah, no, I was going to bring that up, so I'm glad you did. I love it. I once was talking to some friends, and I was like, if every round you could give me the hardest opponent that I could play in that bracket each round, I would snap that off way quicker than the easiest. Because the best way to improve is to play against people who are better than you. It's one of the reasons why you play on Magic Online, right? It's so you hope to run into the Hinderockers and the Jerrys of the world. You want to play against people who are better than you. And Michael, sorry. I'm sorry. I'll stop now. But you want to play against the people who are better than you because that's a great way to learn because they are better than you, and if you try against them, you can get better and improve. I got paired against Corey Baumeister, Brad's brother, at GP Atlanta, and I was super excited. I was like, yes, I get to play against this really great player. And I lost to him, and Seth and Brad had sat down and watched our game, and they started talking, and Seth said, I lost. So I knew Seth was in the same bracket as me, Seth Mansfield, and I was like, awesome. I hope I get to play Seth next round. Look at this scoreboard. It's round 12, Mason Clark versus Seth Mansfield. I'm like, yes, let's go. I got to play against Seth. So it was an awesome moment to get to play against good players back to back to back. And you get that at GPs and other stuff, but I really hate it because I think a lot of people are no, I have to play against Corey Baumeister, and the next round I had to play against Seth Mansfield. That's so unlucky. Now I'm over here I want that every round. Just do it.
I can kind of see it both ways. I think that in terms of affecting your outcome for the day, your win percentage is definitely going to be lower playing against Corey Baumeister and Seth Mansfield than it would playing against, Joe
Schmo and Mike Mason.
Just random guys. But I think that if you're looking at Magic as a long-term game of improvement and develop your own ability to analyze tough situations, I think you're more likely to play interesting games that make you think and help you develop as a player, playing against the best people you can play against than playing against the worst people you can play against.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, is your Dream GP one where your opponents don't show up to any of their matches?
Yeah. Because sometimes if you're
right? I mean, I'm not saying that, there aren't rounds in which you would take the result over the learning, but and I think that realistically everyone has a line for that. Yeah. But I think at the same time, if you're not learning from the games, it's really hard to improve yourself in the longer term. And I think being defeatist minimizes, it just puts you in such a negative space that it's hard to think critically and challenge yourself. It's like, I don't believe that I can win this, so I can't challenge. Like, how are you supposed to put pressure on yourself to play well when you're already sort of giving yourself an excuse to lose?
Yeah, exactly. I like that a whole lot. And I really hate the idea that, like, you deem someone better than you, and so you've, like, already given up, when it's like, well, you wouldn't give up if, you wouldn't want someone to give up if the role was reversed, right? Like, if I was playing Michael wouldn't want me to just roll over like a dog, right? He would want us to actually play the game.
Well, and the thing is that, like, even if the other player is a lot better than you, you are actually just going to win some percentage of the time, right? I mean, even if you're only winning the percentage of the time where they mulled a 5 twice, that's an out. Play to it if it's an out, right? Like, I just think in general, you don't really, there's no benefit besides reducing pressure on yourself. And if you're putting so much pressure on yourself that you have to do things like this, I think you just work on understanding why you're feeling so much frustration when you lose, but trying to, like, lower your own expectations by allowing yourself to lose before you've even started is not really a healthy way to do that.
I agree 100%. I'm glad you started talking about that, because the next point I want to talk about was, what are some ways to help prevent ourselves and catch ourselves in the act of having a defeatist attitude? Do you ever find yourself... I didn't even ask you. Do you ever find yourself doing this, Michael? I assumed not.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, sometimes when you play against someone really good, it's hard to like, not sort of catch yourself chalking it up as a loss. I mean, I think that's true for everyone to some extent. But one of the ways that I really like to try to pull myself out of this is by, like, talking to them before the match and, yeah, exactly. Just, like, making them a friendly opponent and making myself a friendly opponent, and just kind of just improving my headspace in general. Like, if I can just get into a more positive place before the match, I find that I am less frustrated with the results. I have better ability to just play to the best of my ability, rather than being so caught up in, but I'm playing against this person. And ultimately, I just find it a lot more enjoyable. What about you? When you find yourself slipping into those patterns, what are you trying to do to pull yourself out?
Normally, when I find myself slipping, I'll put my cards down for a second, and I'll just, like, readjust myself in my seat and almost, like, stretch, kind of like I'm doing right now. You can't see it, Michael, for the video, but if you're watching the video, you're seeing me, like, do a little stretch thing, and it's like, all right, no, let's get our head in the game. This is why we play. We play the game to have these moments where it's like, you're down, you're the underdog, how do you get out of this? And I try and find the way to get out of the game. And I think taking just a second to stop and stretch, and that can be clearing your head, it could be shuffling your hand, whatever helps you just get in the zone of, like, okay, my goal is to win this game of Magic. Let's focus on doing that, because I paid, the absurd GP price in order to play Magic against people, and even though this round this person's really a whole lot better than me, and I'm in a bad situation, and I'm only into 6 this game, it doesn't mean I should give up. It means I should just try harder to try and win this game and find the way to win the game.
Yeah, I think just, like, keeping it light and keeping it fun. Like, mm-hmm. I can both take a game seriously and appreciate that I'm having the opportunity to play one of the very best people in the world. Like, that's really cool, right? When you get to play Corey and Seth back to back.
Oh, it was awesome.
It's right. It's like, this is why I'm not just at an F&M. Exactly. Right? I can go play Magic any day, but I can't play against Corey and Seth back to back very often at all. So, like, appreciate the opportunity, talk to them.
Yeah.
Most of these guys are nice people.
Yeah, it was awesome. This was the weekend after the Pro Tour, so I daggered Brad immediately when my game ended, and Corey high-fived me, and then got to talk to Seth a little. It was awesome. It was a great experience, and I got to play against really good players in formats where, Seth had won the PT the weekend before, and Corey was on that insane top 8 streak, which he'll later add to his record that day. So it's like, that was a really fun experience to play against people who are a whole lot better than me. And to be in a situation where it's like, yeah, realistically, I was a dog in both those matchups, but I came out the winner of one of them. So And I was super close to the other one too, so it's like these are things
and
you can do.
I mean, you got to play probably interesting games, and one of the things that I like about playing challenging matchups is that you can really take a lot of their actions at face value. Like, if you ask them questions about why they made a play they made, you can expect to learn from that. Or just, like, you can learn from their sequencing and how they, like, the way that they play, you know that they're not... When you're playing against Seth Manfield and he's, like, playing a deck he just won a Pro Tour with, he's not making the decisions he makes on accident.
Yeah.
Right? Like, he's playing with intent, and I think that the amount that you can learn from playing against someone who's really, really good is just so high, and that makes the match so much more interesting.
Yeah, it was funny because he had won with Snake and he was playing Teamer, and then after the match I was like, thanks for the games, whatever. It's funny, I played against your PT winning deck like four times day one, which was true. The most played deck I played against was Sultai Snake, and he was like, yeah, we were just wrong. That deck wasn't as good as we thought it was. And it was just like, awesome. All right, glad to know. Like, I can just push Sultai Snake aside and focus on Teamer. It was just one of those exact.
He's like, that deck wasn't as good as we thought it was, and I won a Pro Tour with it.
Yeah. Look
right?
At all
I mean, imagine if Seth halfway through the Pro Tour had been like, "Oh man, my constructed deck isn't as good as I thought it was."
Yeah.
Right? Like,
I bet he was like that, but he didn't give up. He was like, "But I'm in the Pro Tour. I can't just like not do this. It's my job."
Right.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to say is, imagine if Seth was being real defeatist about it instead of just trying to win the matches in front of him. Right? Like, you could be playing with a worse deck and realize it and still win.
You can also put yourself in situations like the guy who forgot to throw the card at Hazoret. Like, he forgot to throw the card, so he didn't beat PV, but he was like, all right, well, how do I win from here? You know what I mean? Like, obviously, yeah, he wasn't super happy about it, but I felt like that person played a good game for the situation they were in for the rest of the thing.
Yeah, he didn't just concede the match, right? He continued to play Magic.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly. I feel like he got close to winning there. Did you have one of those moments with Jerry when you played against him recently? Because that was a bad matchup. Did you, like, lean in against it or anything?
Wasn't a great matchup, but, like, I don't know. I certainly felt like, I was close to winning that match. My first game was not especially good or interesting.
They didn't actually.
But I was able to... Yeah. Oh, man. I just got run over real fast. But I think I mulliganed to 5 or 6. It was either mulligan to a medium 5 or a bad 6. It just wasn't good. But our board games were really interesting and really close. I won game 2, and then game 3 was very, very competitive. So, I think just like it's really fun to play Magic against players where you don't expect them to make a lot of mistakes.
Yep, and there's a little bit of an edge there because they've played so much Magic, they're not afraid of losing. And I feel like a lot of people who have this problem that we're talking about are just really starting to get into the competitive scene, or are like, in the early stages, I should say, and they're afraid of losing, as if like the loss defines them. Michael, are you ever defined by your losses?
There's always another tournament. You can always play more Magic. I have lost a lot of times when I wish I would have won, and it just doesn't really matter that much.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I've lost 3 times now playing win-ins for Pro Tour invites.
Mm-hmm. And
I have lost... Yeah, well,
That's probably more the good luck.
I linger pretty hard, yeah.
They went there
I linger pretty hard. But, it's just like, losing just doesn't really matter, ultimately. Yep. I'm not that concerned with the result. I'm always more concerned with what I get out of playing. Yeah. And I think that's the main takeaway. If you feel like you're improving and like you're learning, I wouldn't worry about the results too much. The results will come with time and a bigger sample.
Yeah, I would say that results don't matter at all. What matters more is, like, did you learn something? So, yeah, because if you're looking at like a marathon, it's going to matter more that you learned something from that match than, oh, I beat him. Woo!
Right.
Spin around. Well, that's going to do it for our training grounds this week. Michael, I hope they got something out of this. I had a fun time talking with you about a defeatist attitude.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting subject.
I mean, let's be honest. We wrote this for Danny Cathro,
Oh yeah, Danny.
Yeah, Danny's such a defeatist. He's just always like, oh, I can't do anything. I play my token stacks. Blah 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 blah.
No, but I think just like trying to get yourself in a happy, positive, learning focused headspace is probably the best thing you can do for your game. Like, just make Magic fun for you.
Well, if you feel like we've made Magic more fun for you, feel free to go to our Patreon over at patreon.com/ccmtg. The show will always be free, but if you feel like we've given something to you and you want to give back, we have some sweet rewards over there. We have tokens, which, if you remember last week on the show, Spencer said to send me, Mason Clark, on Facebook, all of your information for the tokens. I forgot to send that to Spencer in the morning on Saturday, so they were not going to get sent out for another week. But I think that's good because it's going to give people more time to give us our information. So your tokens are coming. I'm hoping they're all going to be there, assuming you're in the United States, by mid-May. We're very sorry about that once again, but we're going to get them out ASAP. That's on me. That was more like, oh, Dominaria, let's go play a pre-release. And then Spencer's like, super busy for today. Mason forgot to message me. I'm like, I totally did forget to message you. I'm so sorry. But if you're wanting your tokens, they are coming very soon. You can also get some. Are they still doing it, Michael? If you order from Oasis Games, you get tokens? Because I've got a bunch of them over here from all my orders because of your great deals.
I think so.
Okay, you're not sure?
But I can't say with certainty.
Well, I know that if they do, if you ask Michael to sign the cards in the description, he will, because he did for me. So.
Is that really true?
You signed my token, didn't you?
Oh,
if
maybe.
You did, someone did.
Oh, I probably did.
Okay.
I just don't remember it.
That's fair. It's not important. But let's move on. If you want to find Michael, you can reach out to him at MagicMikeMTG on Twitter. You can also reach him on Facebook. His name is Michael Hinderacher, and he's in the Constructed Criticism Family Facebook group. If you're a fan of the show, feel free to join that. If you're a patron, try and join the Constructed Critics group, and we'll get you on in there. It's one of the Patreon bonuses. You can find me at Mason E. Clark on Twitter, and you can find me on Facebook at Mason Clark, along with the Constructed Criticism family and the Constructed Critics group. And you can find me behind the scenes on the Proven Combatants podcast. I'm on the Patreon-only part of the episode. So if you're a patron of that show, sure, you're giving to Autumn and everyone, but really you get to hear my voice more, which is, I know, the highest Patreon reward. Chantel didn't want to make too many people feel like they had to buy it, so she doesn't put it in the description. But we all know the truth, Chantel. That's the real reason for the $5 level. Let's move on to hashtag Would That Be Good. Hashtag Would That Be Good is our Twitter outreach program. If you tweet it, Mason will read it when he's on the show because we're using Audacity now all the time. So that means I won't do it all the time. But our first tweet is from Ben Vasco. He says, tonight was one of the nights, was one of those nights for Magic that's frustrating but makes me want to continue to get better. Hashtag Would That Be Good. Ben, I love that tweet, man. That works perfectly under our show.
Yeah, I totally get that. Like, sometimes Magic is going to be frustrating, sometimes individual games are going to be frustrating, but I think the idea that the solution isn't to, like, rage about variance, it's just, you know.
It's just like, oh, we'll just gotta get better. That's just an
yep,
easy solution.
if I played perfectly, maybe I could have won.
Yep, and that's all you can ask. Alright.
Exactly.
Next we have Mason Clark tweeting, man, this guy has such great tweets. Apparently the babyface has solicited fake ID sales. Hashtag Would That Be Good. So people like to joke that I look very young. If you're watching the video version of the podcast, pause, go to the comments, type how old you think I am. Alright, unpause. I'm 25, even though I look like I'm 20 to 19, is what I've heard. So I was joking on Twitter with Chantel and them that at Vegas we're gonna have to go to the club. And I'm gonna need a fake ID. And so I've gotten multiple messages saying, hey man, I can get you a fake ID, but I tweeted one of them. So that's all it takes to get a fake ID. But I don't
just that tweet about it on Twitter?
Yeah, you just.
Yeah, I feel like we shouldn't promote that.
Yeah, no one, not that any of our listeners would ever use a fake ID. But if they needed to, I also tweeted that guy's information when I took the picture, so there you go.
Did you? I don't see it in his...
Did I edit it out?
Yeah, I think
okay.
so. I think you did a good job. Yeah.
You can actually see... that might not even be his name on that fake ID, the example. If I was a cop, I'd just get him, just like that. Next we have the Matt tweeting. He had... this is some sort of conversation, so let me see here. Oh, okay. So Spencer Howland, your normal host of Constructed Criticism, tweeted, already had a response about this, so at Mason Clark has not sent me the Patreon stuff. We talked about that, right? How the information took him to send out a week later.
Yeah.
Yep. Matt responded to this tweet saying he also hasn't changed his handle. Do it, Mason. Embrace the hashtag MTG babyface. Hashtag Would That Be Good. Michael, do you feel like I have a babyface? You can be honest with me.
I wouldn't change your Twitter handle to it.
I'm not going to. It's branding, Michael. Mason E. Clark everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, you could try to be MTG Babyface everywhere, but like, what if you grow out of it? Then it would be truly, truly terrible.
What
All
if I
your
hit
branding would
puberty
go to
one day?
waste.
That's true, yeah. The Mason Clark branding is perfect. My last name's not changing. Jared tweeted...
Less likely.
Yeah, much less likely. I don't know. It would be very hard.
Yeah, Jared sends a tweet where he is playing a league with Ponza and is playing against 8-Rack, and the 8-Rack player is real salty about it. Which is kind of great. I feel like,
Indie Assault is good.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of like Salt. Like, I don't really do it to other people generally, but I kind of like it when my opponents are a little salty.
Yeah.
It kind of makes me feel better about myself, so I'm sort of into it.
It's actually one of my favorite parts of Magic. It's like, my deck in actions frustrated you so much that you acted like a child. It's too good.
Yeah, I once played a paper draft where I had an opponent literally complain about, I think, every spell I played over an entire match. It was really like it was so salty. It was like just kind of comical at some point. It was great. I still remember it to this day.
Yeah, that's really the best reason to play Hearthstone too, is the salt ads.
Sure.
Yeah, I got 2 of those today. It was great. Made my day better. Disposable Yargle, which, by the way, Michael, hot take on Yargle. Pro Yargle or not pro Yargle?
Like, legitimately unlimited? Like a real question?
Alright, so legitimately hot take, and then we'll get the memes.
Okay, I am not playing a 9/3 for 5. It's trading with 3 drops.
That's fine. You can't be right about everything. Alright, what about Yargle for the memes?
I mean, I like the memes.
That's good.
I like that the art. I think I was talking to you about this the other day, but that the art for everything with low toughness is universally has stumpy legs.
Yes, it's so good. I didn't even notice those were legs. I thought it was like a spirit coming out of something until you said that. And I was like, oh,
Yeah, it's just like, yeah,
legs.
this art looks so much like a 9/3, a vanilla 9/3. I didn't even know that was possible, but they did it.
Yargle, he's the best. But Disposable Yargle tweeted, first person to 3-0 a friendly Dom draft league. Yes! Hashtag would that be good? Hashtag started at the top. So there you go. I like that second hashtag. It's quite good.
Yeah.
Yeah. The deck looks pretty good too. So,
it does look good. I mean, it has a Baneslayer Angel.
Michael, would you accept this deck in your PT top 8 draft?
I mean,
If I can give this to you right now.
I don't know why we're drafting in the top 8 of a PT.
Oh,
but
I just
like,
leaked some information. I didn't
sure.
do that. All right. I meant to say GP and I messed it up. Thank you everyone for watching. It's been a fun week, Michael. I'm just gonna end it before it gets more embarrassing. I'm tired. I need to eat dinner.
All right. Enjoy your evening, Mason.
All right. Thanks everyone for watching. We'll see y'all next week.
See ya.